The Shadow Home Secretary. Not too much talk there about law and order. Is that not a priority?
Well, it's part of the broken society issue, but we can't just fix our broken society through the criminal justice system. As you heard today, we need deep-rooted changes to the welfare state. We need to really rebuild and strengthen families. We need to deal with some of the deep-rooted social issues that we face in so many parts of this country. So it's only a part of a bigger jigsaw puzzle.
In a sense, it all amounts to a bit of a pig and a poke, doesn't it? I mean, it was an hour and a half here, but to sum it up, it's vote for us, you'll have to do more, and we'll do less for you.
Well, one of the big frustrations that I find people talk about in my constituency is when there are big decisions to be taken over things like planning, over the things like the future of the local health service, they feel those decisions are being taken somewhere else, that there is actually no community involvement, that somebody else is deciding what happens to things that really matter to people. What we're saying is that a Conservative government will change that. We want people to join the government, we want people to be part of the decision-making process, we want them to get involved in their own local communities, we want them to help shape what happens in their communities.
Yeah, that's quite a big change. Yeah, but let's take an issue, let's see how it will work in practice. What happens if a community votes that it needs more bobbies on the beat? What happens then?
Well, of course, decisions about local taxation, for example, the local police precept, one of the things that the people who will be elected to take control, overall control, not operational control, but the strategy of our policing will do, is set the local police tax, the police precept, and they will be able to decide the priorities in that area.
So in other words, if you want more police, you vote to tax yourself more?
Well, or to run the police force differently, to set different priorities. So there are different ways of doing things. We say we want to spend more time concentrating on antisocial behaviour, for example. So we want more of our police resource concentrated in ensuring there are police out on the beat on a Friday and Saturday night to deal with antisocial behaviour. These are decisions.
And that means more burglaries during the week because there are fewer police.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean more burglaries. The things that we have to do. I've been in police stations the last few days talking to police officers who say to me they spend so much time doing stuff for government, obeying the diktat of government, doing what the government rule book says, doing things that the Home Secretary wants. What we want is the police to be doing things that the people want.
But at the same time, some of those things, they may not be particularly popular, but they have been deemed necessary. And if you have this community people power, they may not actually know what the correct balance of using police time is in order to make it the most effective.
Look, what we're seeing up and down the country is people saying, my community is dogged by antisocial behaviour, no one's listening. What we do by putting in place somebody who is elected by them to set a strategy for policing in their area, to take decisions into the community, to let people say, this is what I want for the priorities of policing in my force area, then there's somebody to put those priorities into practice.
But isn't that, and we've heard this from very senior police officers, isn't that precisely what your local police chief should be doing anyway? And all you're doing is putting in another layer of bureaucracy.
Well, at the moment, people don't feel they have a say. They don't feel able to input. They don't feel able to say, this is what I want to be different about the strategy for policing in our area. Actually, we want to change that. We want them to be able to see who's in charge, to be able to input into what that person decides, to really empower communities.
But it is another layer of bureaucracy, isn't it? For all that we've heard about cutting bureaucracy, cutting waste, come to one example, and this idea of people power actually means having another bureaucrat, elected or not.
Not at all. It's less bureaucracy. Let me give you an example of the kind of bureaucracy I want to see disappear. At the moment, if you phone me up and say, I think there's a burglar down the road who's about to leave his house and go off and commit a burglary, the police officer, before they can go and watch to see what's happening, has to fill in a form. I want to change that. I want local police officers to have discretion.
That's you. You're the Home Secretary. We've already got a Home Secretary.
But this is happening.
Now we've got this Commissioner of Police as well.
But what is happening is all the decisions that affect you in your community are taken by faceless people in Whitehall, by over-centralised decisions by the Home Secretary. We've got to change that so that accountability for what goes on in terms of policing your community takes place in your area.
Yeah, but all you're talking about when you're talking about an elected police commissioner is another person, another layer of bureaucracy. Presumably this person's not going to work for nothing, so they're going to be paid, who are just going to be second-guessing what's going on anyway.
They'll take over the responsibilities of the existing police authorities, be much more visible, have greater power to take local decisions about what priorities are. At the moment, decisions are taken either by a faceless police authority or in Whitehall. We want people to know who takes the decisions about what the policing priorities should be in their area. It's all part of a bigger picture of saying to people, you need a greater say in what's going on in your communities.
don't people actually just want a government that knows what it's doing rather than spends the whole time holding local plebiscites to tell them what they know already?
No, you see, I think it's the other way around. I think people want greater power over the decisions taken. If you take planning, for example, planning decisions are ultimately taken by a quango in Bristol. We want local communities to have a greater say over what happens in terms of planning in their area. If they say something isn't right, they should be able to take a decision.
So what happens? A region needs a reservoir, local village doesn't want it, vote against it, and we all die of thirst.
We have to be able to take more decisions about things that affect our communities close to those communities. Right now, people feel frustrated that the decisions are always being taken somewhere else, that I don't have a say, that I'm not involved. We want to say to those people, a Conservative government will change that. You can join the decision-making process, you can join the government of Britain, it will be different.
I mean, but on the other hand, what you're really saying to the electorate, we've got general election electing MPs in a government, we've got local elections underway, and what you're saying is vote for the Conservatives and we'll give away power.
We want to give people back power over decisions in their communities. One of the frustrations people have with the political system at the moment is that decisions are taken remotely, often in a way they don't understand. Let us give people and communities back the power to decide what happens to them over the services that affect them and the environment in which they live.
And what are you lot going to do, meanwhile, back at Westminster?
Well, I think we should be concentrating and perhaps interfering less on taking away some of the regulations that get in the way. I want to take away that form that the police officer has to fill in before he can go and watch over a potential burglar. We've got to say central government doesn't always get it right. It needs to do less rather than more.
So it's definitely about the government doing less.
It's about government doing less. We're also talking about changing our politics. We'll have fewer members of parliament. We'll have more transparent government so that people can see how their money is being spent. But above all, it's saying government doesn't know best. We can devolve power away. We can leave local communities and individuals to take a much clearer level of control over their lives.
I mean, I put it to you again, that's not a very clever slogan, is it? Vote for us, we don't know best.
Well, I think it's what people want. People do not think that government can solve all of the problems. The idea that government can just do it has been completely discredited under 13 years of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Their argument has always been central government knows best. It doesn't. It hasn't worked. People feel frustrated that things are happening that they can't influence, they can't decide, things they don't want to see change are changing. We want to say to those people, we want you back involved. We want you working in community groups. We want you involved in taking decisions across your area, in things like policing. We want decisions taken to a much greater degree away from Whitehall.
But I do come back to this point, once you've given away power, what are you going to do?
Well, we'll have fewer MPs for a start, and I think we're going to have quite a big job in hand actually getting rid of some of the paraphernalia of bureaucracy that keeps so many of our professionals off the streets, our police officers in police stations, our teachers filling out forms, our doctors and nurses filling out forms. We've got to rein back the state and say, trust our professionals, trust our communities, trust our citizens. Politicians don't always know best.
Chris Grayling, thank you very much indeed. And I think there you see a pretty clear philosophical summary of the difference now which is being offered to voters at this election. One government saying, the Labour Party saying it wants to do more with